Welcome to the Hassle-Free RE Podcast, a real estate podcast where we bring you stories, education, and tips for investors and real estate enthusiasts. If you're interested in investing in real estate or just want to keep a pulse on what's happening in the market, then this podcast is for you. Thanks so much for listening and tuning in. If you enjoy our show, please make sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Hassle-Free RE. I'm your host, Dave Menapace, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Anson Roberts. And today we have a lovely discussion with Miss Allie Fugatt and Miss Carrie Douglas. But before we jump into that discussion, Anson, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. It's been another weekend of all hands on deck getting a unit launched. And so, as I've mentioned before, we've tried to partner the family time in the midst of that. So with approval from the owner, we actually stayed on site at this unit while we were doing all the dialing in and last bit of details to get the space listed and get guests through it. So busy weekend, but good time together. But
Love it,
yeah,
dude.
how are you?
Good. Same thing. You know, we're in the middle of two different launches. And it's always this interesting balance where we're working really, really, really hard to continually tighten up our systems. My biggest fear is, if anything were to ever fall through the cracks, or, I'm just really sensitive where every house we take on, I want guests to feel like it's the only house we manage. And then for owners, I really want them to feel the same way too. And
Yeah.
each house you take on is a bit of a stress to that system. And you just kind of, yes, it's fun to grow. But at the same time, we're ever more conscious of, what our key differentiators are and how that's seen by owners and how it's seen by guests. And we work really, really hard to continually critique that. And it's really cool. I started reading a book, you've probably heard of it, called Unreasonable Hospitality. And in the book, they talk about restaurant smart and business smart. It's centered around restaurants and how the two can continually conflict with each other in order to create an amazing dining experience. And very similar, in the world of hospitality, and short-term rentals, it's sort of like, how do you take the love that you have when it's just one house and sort of spread that across a portfolio? So that's kind of what we've been working
Yeah.
on as we've been launching.
Beautiful.
Um, yeah, and then I guess just on the business front, we always run into these really interesting situations or scenarios, right? Where all of our properties are on page one of Airbnb, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting booked, right? Not, every single minute, of every week. And there's always a nuance to surviving in an industry and in an economy. And I think just like working through that without just dropping rates or getting a bad guest in and setting the right expectations with our team members and our owners and with guests, it's been an interesting balance. How about for you?
Yeah. Similarly, we have units in different markets with different seasonality profiles. And so some are coming out of busy season, some are coming in. So in real time, we have to kind of tailor our strategies and images and descriptions and pricing to reflect that. And so while, also as we talk about differentiators, we want our owners to feel like completely in the know while also not needing to do much of anything. And so the way that we communicate how we're adjusting things and the correspondence to make sure they're abreast of our strategies, just to maintain that relationship in a way that we want to be treated, and with the understanding that that will, preserve that relationship for the long haul. And that is a differentiator between us and one of the big boys in the market.
Totally. Totally. And I like that too, right? It's a fun problem to solve. Um, so yeah, I totally agree with you. And overall, I'd say if you know what you're doing with pricing, if you design your home appropriately and correctly, this is still a kick-ass industry. Nothing is without its challenges, and there's always going to be market pressures that make things easier or harder. But the more you can educate yourself and the more that you can keep a pulse on what's happening and try and stay a few steps ahead, you're probably going to be just fine.
Yeah.
So with that, why don't we introduce Allie and Carrie?
We know them actually through the mastermind that we are part of, the STR Secrets mastermind. And they are both complete and utter rock stars in their own ways. And so Allie runs her business with her husband, Kyle, and they have a few different things in the fire. They are obviously operators in the STR space. They both actually operate a podcast together that is focused on women in real estate and STR space. And she's also a mom to a couple of kiddos. And her husband have secured and have just launched their first boutique hotel. And so they are somehow doing all of that and seemingly doing it all really well. And Carrie is also a mother, so navigating family life in the midst of, she has been a real estate agent for a long while and has moved into more of a coaching role, which they both are coaches within this mastermind. And she's also secured her first hotel that she's in the process of, maybe she'll share some about all of, yeah, what she's navigating with getting that thing launched. And so they both are really high level operators doing quite extraordinary things in the market. And I am really pumped to be able to hear more details from them and learn from what they have to share.
Boom. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Hassle Free RE. So, as we mentioned in the intro, today we have Allie Fugatt and Carrie Douglas. Both of them are absolute studs, real estate investors, coaches, consultants, um, big and small investors. They got a lot of stuff going on right now. So, meetups, their own podcast. We could go on forever, but instead of doing that, we're going to start with Allie and then we'll move over to Carrie and then we'll jump right in. So, Allie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here. So my name's Allie Fugatt. We actually invest in Blue Ridge, Georgia. My husband and I live in Georgia, and we have currently 19 properties under management in Blue Ridge, and then we also own a boutique hotel there. So that's my short intro on the short-term rental side. I also am partnered with my husband and Brian Hatcher for a short-term rental franchise. And then Carrie and I do a podcast together as well called She Invests.
Nice. Awesome. Awesome. And Carrie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Carrie Douglas. I live in Wisconsin, and we are investors in both Florida and in Wisconsin. We actually recently liquidated our Florida portfolio so that we could be really focused on our local market where we have a 30-unit boutique hotel. I've been a realtor for the past 6.5 years, and this is kind of, the next phase for me is really getting into the investing side.
Love it. And both of you are coaches for STR Secrets, a mastermind that we're all in. Um, how about for both of you? Why don't we go back before STRs? What were you doing for work? And then we'll kind of bring everyone up to the current time frame.
Yeah, for me, I was a high school teacher before I started doing this. So I taught high school science for 6 years before I quit and became a full-time real estate investor. Mom of two during that time, and actually left probably about 6 months after my son was born into teaching and joined the real estate full-time.
Now, did you quit mid-year or did you wait it out till the summer?
Oh, I waited it out, but it was kind of a voluntold situation.
Sure.
I had actually, so there's like some stipulations within the school system. Like some people don't know, but like I just got in teacher of the year. And one of the actual qualifications is that you have to stay on like for the next year. So I can finished out my year just because they would like kind of rip that from our school. But it was kind of like I was in a very hard time of life because of my family too. So I actually was having to take the kids to work with me. So I finished out my last 6 months of the school year with a baby strapped to my chest and a 4-year-old sitting in class with me. So
Oh my gosh.
Rock
yes,
star.
yes,
That's crazy.
yeah.
Good for
That
you.
that might be why I got teacher of the year, but that's how it ended.
Good for you. And Carrie, what were you doing before you really got into investing?
Yeah, so most immediately before getting into investing, I've been a realtor for the last 6.5 years. Prior to that, I've had a whole bunch of different sales and customer service roles and some business management, working for a small startup. So for me, it was sort of a natural transition into real estate sales. And then that led to this natural transition into investing. And I knew that I wanted to get into investing in real estate as soon as I became a realtor. But we had to wait till we found an asset class that my husband was comfortable with. And short-term rentals is a little more comfortable for him because, as we know, the homes sustain a little bit less wear and tear. It can be a lifestyle asset, so that's where he felt the most comfortable. So we've only been investing as owners for the past like 2.5 to 3 years. Prior to that, just real estate sales for the most part.
So really, you
Allie,
just want to go
what?
on. Oh, sorry, Anson, you take it.
All good. No, I was curious, Allie, what brought you in to the STR space and attracted you and Kyle to that space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So originally, like when I was still teaching, Kyle and I had always had a goal, just like from seeing our parents before us, that we didn't want to work for anybody by the time we were 30. And so originally we thought that goal was going to be long-term rentals. We were definitely on the rich dad, poor dad line. We had some property that we were able to actually get from some family members. So we were able to purchase it off of them because they wanted to get rid of it. And so we were just renovating and renting. And so I was never excited about that because it was very little income, obviously, off of each long-term rental. And so I fell upon the Short Term Rental Secrets podcast. And also, like, honestly, that was the first time I'd ever gotten excited. Like, when I got in and like ran the numbers for the property that we were currently renovating, I was like, oh my gosh, like, we could be making so much more. And so we just decided to try it. So we joined the mastermind and like launched literally at the same time we launched our property and joined the mastermind. And we made just as much off of that one property as I was making teaching. And so that was what allowed me to quit my job. And so that was the first time I think that I had ever been excited about real estate, is because it obviously opened that door for the freedom that I was looking for to be home with my kids, and honestly like to make that income, right? So that's like my probably my biggest success story is like one property allowed me to leave my job.
That's
Love it.
amazing.
Mhm.
That's
What
got
was
chills.
could you share high level about that property?
Yeah. So we actually bought that property for I think we ended up closing on it for about 54 grand. It was a 2-bed, 1-bath house in Carrollton, Georgia. So if you aren't familiar with Carrollton, it is the University of West Georgia is there. It's a very small college town. There's some other like large manufacturers there. So our main avatar was the business provider that was there. We actually had a direct communicate our line of communication with, which was Southwire, very large corporation. So we targeted their high level investors coming in and their operators that they needed to house. And then there's a major hospital there. So this was right during COVID. Worked out perfectly for us. We had a ton of traveling nurses. And then our third was people coming to visit their kids at the college. And so graduation time, we were always like flooded. And so we ended up within a year, we only owned that property for a year. We bought it for 54,000 and we ended up selling it for I think $120,000. And then we profited within that year almost $100,000 off that one property.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Like we killed it.
And just as context, as Allie mentioned, identifying their avatar for that unit, something that's just a little nugget for everyone to take note of, that getting really specified on who's going to be using a unit, obviously turns into some pretty wild success because they were clear on that. So I love that.
Yeah. And ultimately that, like, the sale of that property and the investment, the return that we got off that investment is what allowed us to move and to invest into the market that we're in now. So, so that was a really big play for us. So first, that one property had a huge play on our entire business model. It let me leave my job, and then it allowed us to invest in a larger property, a syndicated property that we have in North Georgia, which is getting us like better returns, right? And ultimately, just like Carrie said, like moving into like just a better class of investing that's going to get us higher returns. So we're actually about to sell that property in North Georgia, again, holding it for a year. And we're due to make probably a couple $100,000 off that property when we sell. So, so that's huge, right? It's just like moving your money into the right places in order to, of course, change your business model and elevate to the next level.
Boss. That's cool. Carrie, let's hear about your first purchase. That's a tough one to follow up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my first purchase is not as exciting for sure. So we ended up purchasing our first property in Safety Harbor, Florida, in 2021, and I thought we were buying at the peak of the market. So I said, this is going to be a cash flow play. This is not an equity play. Like, we probably won't sell this for more than we paid, but we're going to be profitable, during the time that we own it. That was the plan. And when we bought it, I wasn't a part of any education around STRs yet. It was just me kind of doing the best that I could with the resources I had. So I didn't have a very clear way to underwrite a property. I didn't have a lot of the guidance that I have today. So we just kind of did our best, but it turned out pretty good. I will say there was some change to the regulation. So we kept going and kind of flew under the radar for a little while. And then it ended up that, like, a hurricane came through, and while we weren't affected, insurance went up a ton. So our expenses went up a lot. The electricity went up a lot. There were just a lot of things that changed about the expenses over the 2 years that we owned it. So we were not nearly as profitable on a monthly basis as I had expected. But after that 2-year mark, I started running like return on equity. I was like, okay, the house did go up in value. So even though I didn't expect, like, none of this was bad. Okay. It was just different than I expected. So instead of being like a cash cow on a monthly basis, we were doing okay, but instead the value went up a lot. And so I was like, well, let me run the return on equity here. And it wasn't making a ton of sense. It was like 12%. And because, like I said, regulations had changed and a few other things, there were just like a couple of uphill battles. I was like, I think it's time to just liquidate this one. And so that started the liquidation of the two that we had in Florida, one under management, one under ownership. And we ended up selling that one. We had bought it for $380. We sold it for $515. So what I thought was going to be a cash flow play turned out to be an equity play, and it still was really, really good. Like, we're very happy with how that turned out. It was just kind of the opposite of what I expected it to be. So,
and I know it might have been right before this or right when we started. Did you end up having a portfolio of properties there? Was it that one, or what kind of?
We just had two there, and the original plan was to continue growing in that location. And then as we sort of looked at things, it was like, yeah, I don't think this is where we want to grow the portfolio further. I think we need to look at our local market because We actually live in a vacation market here in Wisconsin. It's a drive-to market. People from Chicago come up this way. It's about an hour, maybe an hour and a half for them, depending on where they live in the city. And it's the perfect escape. And we know that drive-to markets do really well in times when, you know, people don't want to spend the money to book a flight somewhere. So it seemed like a really good spot. And the reason I hadn't looked in my local market previously was because there's a lot of regulation around short-term rentals that are single family homes. And I was like, I don't want to be subject to that amount of regulation. You can only rent them half of the year. Then you have to take it off the market for the other half of the year. And so I thought, well, that doesn't seem to work for me. So instead, once we got comfortable, I decided to go after a boutique hotel because that is zoned for that use, and it's not subject to short-term rental regulation because it's not a residential property. It's commercially zoned, and so it's protected. So they can change the regulations all they want to. I don't have to worry about it. So that was the strategy there, and why. And I think it's a much better fit for us, honestly. So everything works out the way that it's supposed to. But that's kind of the journey to how we got to where we are today.
Could you mentioned using this return on equity calculation on that. Could you and Allie definitely chime in as well? Could y'all expound on different calculations you use to determine whether you're going to acquire a property, keep a property, obviously the return on equity side, and the return on investment is general ROI calculation. So yeah, can you talk us through how you went about that?
Yeah. So when you purchase a property, you're oftentimes looking at cash on cash return. I know it's what a lot of people use to calculate, you know, when they're making a purchase. So how much money am I bringing to the table versus how much is it going to produce each year? What does that return look like? And that in the STR world, that money that you're bringing to the table wouldn't just be your down payment and closing costs. It would also be furnishings. You know, what are you entirely putting in to get this property live versus what is it going to produce in terms of cash flow each month? So when I purchased the property in Florida, the anticipated cash flow was, I want to say it was like a 30% cash on cash. And then with our, you know, insurance going up and some other things, it ended up being, you know, closer to 20, which is still good. But when I looked at the return on equity, it's a different calculation. So instead of looking at the cash I brought to the table, which was $75,000, I looked at how much equity was tied up in the property. So now if I were to go and sell it after paying realtor commissions, I would have walked away with 120,000. So instead of 75 all in, now I have to be looking at 120 all in. And what is it producing? And I think it was actually closer to 150 that we would have walked away with when I did the math. And so when I took the exact same cash flow, distributed among the 75 that I would have put in initially versus the 150 that I now had all in, if I were, you know, because the property value has gone up, you can easily see how that cuts it in half, right? So instead of, you know, a 20%, it was like 10 to 12% return on that equity that I had tied up in the property. So it's basically you're calculating an opportunity cost. By leaving this property right here, cash flowing the way that it is currently, what am I missing out on that I could be making? So if I took that 120 or 150 proceeds, sell the property and go do something else with it, could I be generating twice as much money as I am currently? And the answer was clearly yes. So that was the calculation for me. Did I answer that well? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. We actually talked about this on one of our podcast episodes. We went through and like broke down all the numbers and everything with Carrie's deal. As we were like having the conversation about what her play was going to be. And we did the exact same thing to answer your question, Anson. When we're investing right now, like obviously like when we're running deals for homeowners, most of our homeowners are actually really interested in the cash on cash that they're going to get. So that's what we're running for them. But for ourselves, we're looking at the equity play. Just like the home that we're invested in North Georgia, it was never a long-term hold. It was where can we put this money that we made off this first house and put it somewhere where it's going to make me an even larger return. And we knew that it was an equity play. We didn't even put all of it in there. We only put some of it in there, and we actually ended up getting points on equity for that deal without putting extra money into the deal because that's the way we structured it. So for us, that is always the play, just the same as the hotel. With our hotel, we currently own like 36%. We're the majority owner of the hotel, which 36% equity of a large investment property like that with no money of ours brought to the table is pretty much unheard of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. Kim and I have been analyzing another Cape Cod property, and it's a really unique situation, both for the sellers and for us. And we've been looking at the equity in all of our different properties and penciling it out. It's like never, it seems like it's never a good time to buy a house, but when there's a good opportunity, you can't time that out, right? And most investors, if they buy a good deal, they don't regret buying it. It's just a pain in the neck to get it over the goal line because it's always at like inconvenient times. So as you're doing that, I'm over here with my calculator. I'm like, wait, what is our equity in this house and that house? And maybe I should just cash out refinance. I don't want to sell it. It's funny. A lot of things just ran through my head in the last 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's tricky because if you do, like when we sold it, rates weren't as high as they are today.
Right.
But if I were in that position again right now, I mean, on that second home of ours, we had a locked, 3.5% interest rate. So there may have been a totally different calculation right now today if I were to take that same 150 and go reinvest it somewhere. My cash flow might be completely different because of what my new mortgage payment might look like with the rates where they are today. So I think it really just has to do with what's going on in the current situation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It definitely takes some creativity. So, and being patient is smart, even when an opportunity is staring at you in the face. So we've been balancing this like for 40 days. We've been engaged with this seller and the listing agent, but we've also been really patient as we're trying to figure out where's everybody's breaking point for us, for them, what will it take? So, both of you, I know, Allie, you just launched a hotel in Carrie. Is yours launched or under contract? You're in the process of buying, right?
So I own it on seller financing. We're working on our loan for the renovation.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I currently have some midterm stays taking place at the property.
Okay.
So it is, it's not like a terrible situation. It's I would say
Yeah.
cash flow neutral. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
But while we're working on, our plan and our funding for the renovation, that's what's going on there.
Very cool. Now, obviously, that is a totally different asset class than a single family home. Sometimes there's a lot more tears, sweat, and blood that happens through the whole process. But what got both of you interested in that asset class, and what's keeping you committed to it?
Go ahead, Allie.
um, so for us, like I said, we have 19 or about to be 19 properties in North Georgia that we manage, and we own one of those. So the problem is they're all spread out, right?
Sure.
And then also like love the co-hosting model. We're able to make a really good living off of the co-hosting model. However, we don't own any equity in those homes. So we are making money for those homeowners for when they sell to show that business as, profitable, but we're not gonna get any money off of that. Um, so just shifting that to like, okay, where can we have equity in a larger play and have all the units in one spot? And so obviously with staying in the hospitality industry, because we're killing it at that. And so we knew that that was the way that we wanted to stay. So that's where we landed into the hotel model. So obviously also through short-term rental secrets, we'd seen Mike go through his and go through the numbers, and it just made sense. And another thing was that we just kind of landed like and had this like aha moment was Kyle had went through a whole course on how to syndicate and raise money. And we already knew, again, the hospitality model. And we were like, they should just marry each other and make this cute little baby of a boutique hotel. And that's what we did. And so, and that's what's honestly keeping us going is now, again, if we can replicate this exactly what we've done, where we're a majority equity shareholder without bringing any money to the table, why not? Like it's a no-brainer. And then all my units are in one spot. I have in-house teams for everything. So I'm not dealing with like the BS of like firing, hiring, cleaning teams, right? Everybody's there and it's just one business versus multiple little businesses on the side for all these other homeowners.
What was, I think to a lot of people, the idea of getting into the acquisition, the build out, and the management of something like a hotel, that's a pretty significant mental shift. Would love to hear about both of y'all's internal process from where you were at and then getting to the point now of you both being owners of hotels.
Yeah. I will say, well, first of all, Carrie, I'll just jump in and say it's not easy. And I think that the excitement definitely fuels you in the beginning because from us, we were renovating properties and hosting properties. And so we were like, oh, we've renovated 20 houses in the past 2 years. This is nothing. Like, oh, a 42 unit hotel. That's easy. The rooms are like 500 square feet. That's nothing. We've done whole houses. This is going to be a piece of cake. So that tricked us. And we get into like the nitty gritty of it. And like, yes, Anson, having to switch that mindset of like, it was easy in the beginning and then we get into it and it got harder. But so like having to keep the right mindset throughout that, like, okay, just like one at a time, just knocking things out one at a time. So, and then for us, the management portion of it was simple. It's the same team. I'm just using the same team. And it's very similar because our hotel, like unlike Carrie's, we are on short-term rental policy because just the same as her, we exited the actual hotel requirements so that we could have, more leniency on what we could do. So we're a 2-night minimum. So it's literally copy and paste from what we're doing with our rentals over. So I would say like my operations and everything else was a simple mental move because it was like I've already been doing it, right? I would say like the biggest thing that we had to hurdle is the renovation piece and like everything because you don't know until you know. And again, on a larger scale, we were totally used to doing it on a single family home, knocking it out. But when you have to take a 1960s 42 unit hotel and take it down to complete concrete studs and redo the plumbing and electrical, then you're like, I don't know what I got myself into. And so just like staying positive and resourcing like through a community and obviously daily reminders of I'm so happy and grateful. And this is where, the life chose us.
Yeah, that's I think that last piece is so critical. And as you referenced at the beginning too, I think that we all know most things have a honeymoon phase and and we can get pretty amped on something. But you coming back to that mantra you just mentioned, day 94 into launching a 60 something or however many units you said it was, 40 something units. I'm sure that was absolutely critical for y'all.
Yeah, and it still is. And I want to say this too to like investors out there getting into this, because like Carrie even hinted to it earlier, like it's not all sunshine and rainbows when you're in it and you're doing it, because just like things come up that we didn't plan for in the renovation process. And so it's okay. Like we launched at 80%, right? We launched at 80%. There's still stuff that has to be done. And so I think also a shift in mindset of like perfect isn't like doesn't have to be 100% ready, right? And so allowing yourself to accept, I wouldn't say less than perfection because our rooms are pretty much perfect at that point, but allowing yourself to give yourself some grace and just go for it, even though you're not completely finished, has been like a huge thing. And because the important thing is the cash flow, so that so that you can return on your investors' money. And that's like the number one when you're doing this, is like you're responsible for all of their money. So like making sure that they get paid. And the biggest thing for that was opening rooms. And so I think that giving ourselves grace to open up and allow people to come in and see this amazing space that we have without us feeling like it's not perfect and it's not ready. That was something we had to overcome too. And it's something that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about because they really don't want to share their products until they're like completely ready.
To go back to one of your questions about, why did I get into the hotel space? So, I think for me, a lot of my journey into investing in general and specifically hotels comes from the personal growth space. So becoming an independent contractor 6 years ago and not having a boss and being responsible for my own production level, I really got into mindset work and the personal growth space. And I think it started with like Brendan Burchard, which led me to somebody else, which led me to somebody else. And eventually I found Rich Dad Poor Dad, and so for me, one of the things that I've noticed about my wiring is that 10x is easier than 2x. And, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the book by that name, but I tend to, when I want to make a change, I either like go all the way in or I don't. And so it actually felt easier for me to do something at scale where I could entirely shift my identity, even though shifting an identity is a difficult process and it takes time and shifting your paradigm or getting comfortable with big numbers, to make a purchase that's 10 times the price of my original purchase, my first investment. I just kept telling myself, like, hide the last zero, right? Like, and this goes back to your question, Anson, about mindset. Like, how do you like fathom going from 2 units to 30, Carrie? Like, why would you do that? Well, I just kept covering the last zero. So instead of buying something at, 380,000, I'm buying it at 3.8 million. And so then I asked myself similar questions like, oh, would I spend, if I was buying a house for 380,000, would I spend 2,500 on, coaching or mentorship to make sure I did it properly? Yes, I would. So then when it comes to doing a property that's 10 times more expensive, well, rationally, I'm going to have to spend 10 times more on mentorship, resources, education. How do you do this correctly? Right. So I'm just trying to use that formula of like totally shifting into this bigger thing. And of course it's been scary. But I think it's also invigorating. And that's the part about my wiring that like has made this really exciting. Is I tend to be a person where once I've created something and gotten really comfortable with it, I'm not comfortable anymore. I'm actually more comfortable being challenged and doing something new and learning something new. And so that's kind of that like mindset piece that made me want to go big or go home.
I love that. And I see that you both have touched on it. There's almost a strategic ignorance or like conscious ignorance at play. That's, I think, is necessary so often in entrepreneurship and even in the real estate space, where like you're choosing to omit a number, or Allie, you are choosing, like getting yourself into something that is above pay grade at that moment. But like, if you were to know everything involved out of the gate, like sometimes I don't know if we would make the decisions that we do if we would know everything. And so, yeah, it's incredible how you've both.
Absolutely. Well, and another thing that I think you touched on was like the actual tactical operations side of something of this magnitude, right? So I try to remember who, not how, because I know that I'm a visionary and I can see the vision for this property. I know what it's going to be like. It's all up here in my head and I know it's going to be amazing. But I also know that I am not the person who should be handling the day-to-day operations. And so that'll be a strategic hire when we get to that point in the game. And so like fully aware of that from its inception, the whole operations side isn't frightening to me because I know that's not going to be my responsibility. It's not my strength. So why would I put myself in that position?
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
I feel like the last 20 minutes have been such a clinic. I actually took like a page, not even kidding, took a page of notes, and I think I got goosebumps like twice. So
Awesome.
that was cool. That was really cool.
Good.
Really, really neat. I think what's really cool though is that both of you have really leaned into growth in so many different ways, right? Like for both of you, and I think this is true of a lot of people who are doing big time investments like you, is you go through these like different phases, these different growth seasons, I like to call them, right? From usually it's somewhere like where you're at, and even just getting the mindset to do one investment, right? Or convincing your spouse to come on board and do that investment, right? Like that's one massive growth hurdle. And then there's usually another as you start to scale or maybe start another business like co-hosting and management and things like that. And then there's like, okay, now you're going to different stories. You're not just taking new steps, you're taking an elevator up, right? And I also want to just circle back. There's a few books that were just mentioned that I think are really, really important and have really changed my life. And it's funny, it was Anson that introduced me to some of them. One of them was 10x is easier than 2x. And that reigns true on so many levels. We could do a show just on that. But,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a lot of ways. And for our listeners, the premise is that um, when you go 10x, you have to create entirely new systems. It's not just working harder and doing more. And the person that can think about the systems that they're creating and implementing rather than just what has to be done is those are usually the folks that can achieve 10x. And um, an amazing book. And then Who Not How. You can't do 10x without understanding the concept of who not how. And I know all four of us have lived through that in
Yes.
several different iterations, but I think it's really cool. And I also loved, Carrie, what you said about hiding that last zero. Like I never thought about it that way. And I think the world would be a lot less scary if we all practice that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The other book I just want to mention that I did kind of throw out there was the book Traction, where you would have a visionary and you would have an integrator. So it works really well with Who Not How, but knowing my own strength and knowing that I'm a visionary. So that's just another one.
Yeah, God, another one I've read recently, and
Yeah.
that one's really resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
Allie, would you consider yourself an integrator or a visionary, or maybe a little bit of both?
I am actually a little bit of both. And I have actually had to become more of that visionary role in what we're doing now and allow like thankfully I have a very good team and again like implementing the who not how and to allow them to like take control and do the things that they need to do and just like passing it off, right? So like, hey, I got you this cool system, go use it. Like this is the vision we have for it. So that's been really nice to do that.
I love it. I find with Kim and I'm definitely more of a visionary. She does a really good job of balancing both because some of our biggest decisions were totally her idea, and they were by far our best, like ones that really moved the needle in our life as partners together. But um, yeah, it's interesting. I oftentimes look at other people running investment companies or management companies or both, and I'm like, I don't know how they do that alone. Damn.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think ours is probably the same, Dave. I feel like Kyle is very much the visionary for things, and he, I mean, he'll go on for hours, like every day, about things that like we need to do, and like what, and then like I'm the one that has to be that visionary integrator that's like keeping us grounded because, and I feel like even those people that are out there probably running the things by themselves they've got a number two somewhere that's having to do all that for them. We probably just don't see them, even if it's not their life partner, right? It's um business partner, whoever that you just don't see. Because I mean, thinking about it and like going through it, I don't know of a successful business that has a visionary as a leader that doesn't have someone behind them being that person that's keeping them grounded.
Exactly.
Anson, what category do you fall in now that we're having this little round table?
Yeah, I definitely lean into the visionary side of things. And I feel like I've been competent enough on the integration side and the operation side, and almost a level of competency that has pushed me out of mentioning another book is my zone of genius, because at times I can lean on sufficient level of competency on that side where don't I have not historically always pushed myself to get the right who into the right seat. And I'm actually not leveraging my skills at the highest level possible. And so that's the next phase for our operation, is hiring those correct who's for those seats to get me in the proper seat on the bus. Because that's the absolutely crucial element to us progressing into kind of the next iteration of our operation.
Love that. Hell yeah. Well, Carrie and Allie, what does kind of, if we were to envision here, what are kind of some of your next goals or challenges to climb, and where are you trying to each take your careers within this industry?
So for me, I think getting this hotel renovated and reopened is step number one. Like that's the one thing right now. And so funding that renovation has been my primary focus. But outside of that, I want to take a look at my local market and see what other needs there are. So I try to be pretty agile as an entrepreneur, and look at, where is there a need in my marketplace, and can I fill that need and still be profitable? Well, then why wouldn't I, right? It's sort of like a social purpose business, if you will, or a social enterprise. And so I'd like to really take a look at the affordable housing situation in my market. I wasn't aware of how badly that was needed when I made my current investment. And so I'm not saying I want to get out of short-term rentals because I love that asset class, but I do want to entertain the idea of other asset classes as well, and just sort of explore and see if there's a profitable business model where I can be serving the community well. So that's definitely a goal for me.
Awesome.
So for myself, and my husband, our goals are actually like our one thing right now is like finishing out the last bit of the hotel, which is just the cafe, which should be finished at the end of the month. And then once that's done, we feel pretty confident that systems are in place there. So our next goal is to take down international investments. So we have some friends that are already, we are slowly and slyly on the back end working out some deals right now, possibly for a Costa Rica deal. So that's going to be our next play. Our next move is hooking up with some of our friends who are investors and offering that hospitality service to them that we've already been doing while having an equity play in larger resorts internationally.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it.
Something that I am really curious about for both of you, as you've both seemed to have refined how you're showing up in the marketplace in the midst of all the other things, being moms and partners and all these aspects of your business. How would you characterize your specific zones of genius? Where do you operate as like the best in the market that you think that either just in personal reflection or from what the feedback from partners or guests have communicated, where do you shine in the areas that you operate?
Allie, go ahead.
You want to go? Ours is our motto is Southern hospitality at its finest. And that is where we shine. So for our homeowners and for our guests, We just kind of try to go the extra step to make sure that they are genuinely feeling that Southern hospitality. And our hospitality is where we stand out overall against everything. That's our biggest sales point in our current. And even with our hotel, that's like where we're taking that to, because that's what honestly that's what people are coming for. And either you're a homeowner or you're a guest at the hotel or at a cabin, it doesn't matter. You want that specific hotel hospitality feel, even if you're not at a hotel, and you want to feel like you're taken care of, and that's where we shine.
So for me, it's not so much in the operations of the business like Allie's is. So for me, it's definitely about transformation. So I can look at a property and see what it can become. And a lot of people maybe can't picture that because it's in really rough shape. Or I can drive down this street in my community and say, okay, these streets are lined with these types of properties, and this one kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. Maybe that's a place to come in and make a change. Or, hey, there's a realization that we have people who've been living there their whole lives being priced out of this market because it's a vacation market, and all these people are wanting to buy second homes here, but who's going to come in and do the cleaning? Who's going to work in our restaurants? Like what activities are you going to enjoy when you buy your second home here and there's nobody to work at the ski lodge, right? So that's where I think my strategic thinking and that like visionary role helps me think about where can I come in and transform.
Awesome. I love that. Well, as we sort of come to the end of our recording here, what are each of you most proud of so far in your journey?
You go first, Carrie.
Okay. I think I'm the most proud of my own personal growth. I also think I'm proud of the way that I see the industry and marketplaces changing. I was raised in a family where I was told I could do anything that I wanted to do. And then when I got into like the business world, and sometimes I was the only woman at a table, I was really confused. I was like, what's going on? Like, I was almost naive to the fact that like maybe fewer women take those risks or take big leaps. And then secondly, I think just my ability to maybe let go of where I had been and go for some kind of big transformation personally, as well as, the project that I'm working on. I think those are things that I'm really proud
of. I think for myself, I'm most proud of, again, for sure, the personal growth, but also the relationship growth that Kyle and I have had through all of this. We've been together for 17 years, and I would honestly say, like, from the time that we stepped out as entrepreneurs, over the past 3 years has been the most growth that we've had, as in a relationship, and like learning and leaning into, to all of that, and taking it in stride, as well as like with a family and everything else. But by also, I think our greatest achievement is by doing better than those that came before us and learning from that. And by doing so, we are now able to offer a different quality of life to our parents, to our children, helping with our grandparents that we're thankful to still have. So that has been phenomenal for us, and to be able to give back to people who gave so much to us, and to be able to change that culture within our children, and them moving forward. So super excited about that, and super excited about doing all that before I hit 30. So that was a huge accomplishment of mine.
Awesome. That's awesome. And last question, how can our listeners get in touch with either of you if they'd like to connect?
For myself, you guys can follow me on socials at she_host_Blue Ridge, on Facebook and Instagram. And then I'm also, my business is Cherokee Rose Homes on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And then Carrie and I also do a podcast together, She Invests, and you can find us on Apple, Spotify, and why am
YouTube.
I losing the other? There we go, YouTube. I was like, there's another one.
Yes. Best way to reach me would probably be direct message on Facebook or Instagram. It's at Carrie Douglas Realtor.
Love it. Awesome, team. Well, with that, this was Allie Fugatt and Carrie Douglas. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, guys.
Absolutely.